Okay, welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be looking at Silent Hill 4. This is the last of the Silent Hill videos I do want to 100% do. Obviously we've mentioned a couple of times now that games after 4 kind of did take a dip. I'm not 100% sure if I want to do those yet. But 4 I actually quite like. 4 I quite like. 4 I would say, to me, I prefer more than 3. Which is an interesting opinion to have apparently, but I quite like 4. And what it does, how the game is kind of shown to you and what you can do and how you interact with the world is really unique, I think, for the series. Obviously there's a lot of similarities, but there's a lot going on in this game that's quite interesting, and I really do quite like it. So let's get into the details, briefly touch on the story without spoiling anything for anyone who hasn't played it. And yeah, let's just jump into it. So, Silent Hill 4, The Room, you play as Henry Townsend, I think his name is. And this game does not take place in Silent Hill. It takes place in a fictional town called Ashfield, in an apartment building. The main gist of the game is you play as Henry, of course, and you have been trapped in your apartment room for 5 days. It is locked from the inside, we have no idea how it happened, and every night he has the same recurring dream. Eventually these holes open up in his apartment walls, which take him to like different dimensions, different realities, and a lot of the areas you do kind of play in are quite weird. Like this one in the gameplay specifically is called the Water Prison, which is an interesting area if anyone's played the game. The footage in the background is a bit messy in the foggy parts of the game, I don't know why, but when it's not in the fog it does look a bit better, so just bear with it a little bit. But yeah, without going too much into the story, the gist of it is to find out why this is happening, and obviously, try and get out of your apartment room because you don't want to be stuck in there forever. Because, you're gonna be stuck in your room, and it's not ideal to be stuck in a room for that long because, weird things are happening and you could die. So you kind of want to get out of there. But yeah, without going too much into the kind of story of the game, that is the general idea. Now, of course, as we know, Silent Hill is a survival horror game, and the tropes are definitely still there. There is only certain save points you can perform a save, and that is in Henry's room. Throughout the levels, there is portals and holes, I should say, holes back to your apartment where you can save the game. What's interesting is the apartment part of the game is in first person, which is nice. It's like a nice blend of first and third. First is only in the apartment, and weird things do happen in the apartment throughout the game, which again I don't want to completely spoil for people because it does kind of ramp up gradually. And then the main game is obviously played, kind of like Silent Hill 3 and 2 and 1 really, they're all third person games. Combat, melee weapons are quite a bit more dominant than guns. There's only 2 guns in the game, but there's quite a few melee weapons in the game, which is nice. They also break as well, so you have to kind of be aware that your weapon could break mid-fight. Again, healing limited, inventory limited. What's good about this game is there is essentially like a Resident Evil item box back in Henry's apartment. You can kind of store items for later that you might not need yet, whether that's extra healing or a gun. If you feel there's a boss fight coming, you can kind of find the nearest hole back to your apartment and find that gun, and there you go, take it with you. But melee weapons are more kind of accessible in this game than firearms. There is a difference in the endings. They do mainly revolve around, again, things that happen throughout the game. A big example of this is you eventually, halfway through the game, I believe, you have your neighbour, which is called Eileen, I believe, who essentially follows you around. She's in the gameplay here, you can see her, and I'm not really going to go into, kind of who she is and what happens and stuff, but essentially, things you do in the game can affect her character in certain ways, as well as the ending of the game. I think the ending of the game depends on the state that she's in at the end of the game, because she can get hurt and stuff like that. So her being in a bad state at the end of the game can affect the ending. I'm not going to really again go into specifics on what it does unless you haven't played it, but yeah, you have to kind of look after her. Just imagine a more useful Ashley from Resident Evil 4. She can kind of fight back a little bit, but she also kind of hobbles around and gets into trouble like Ashley in Resident Evil 4. It's very similar in a sense. One thing this game did, which is very different to 3 specifically, I think, is that in 3, which you mentioned in the video, there was different difficulty options for puzzles and combat. Essentially what that would do is obviously combat would increase the difficulty of combat, obviously, you know, how hard you get hit, how many hits enemies take, stuff like that. And the puzzle one would make things more simple to remember or harder to remember. Like I mentioned briefly in the 3 video, there was a puzzle in 3 where on normal you'd have to remember a certain thing from the game, but on the harder option you would actually have to know some kind of Shakespearean play background. You'd have to actually know that stuff to figure it out. Instead, what they decided to do was just combine the two in this game. It's not massively kind of difficult with the puzzles, it's still stuff you can kind of figure out on your own or just look up nowadays. But they're in the same difficulty now, so there's not 2 options anymore, it's just the 1 option for an overall difficulty of the game. On top of all that, they added a new kind of enemy type to this game. Just, they were ghosts basically, and you couldn't fight the ghosts, you obviously couldn't like shoot them or anything like that. There were certain ways to deal with them, and that was only temporarily on to get rid of them or to kind of knock them out for a little bit. You know, you see a ghost in this game, you're probably better off just to run. So they were kind of like the pursuer types of the game, you know, they just kind of appeared, and you had to kind of obviously hope you had something on you to deal with them, or just leave them be and try and get past them. Which again adds a whole new depth of kind of just trying to figure out how to get around stuff more effectively. I like the enemy types in this game, especially that one right there. They are quite creepy. There is some decently creepy enemies in this game as well. So Silent Hill 4 is definitely still a stronger entry in the series. The enemy types, the audio in these games, still even to the 4th game, is really, really good. On top of that, obviously the usual kind of survival horror tropes with the whole limited inventory, save points being quite far apart. It does help add that whole intensity to the game, and you know, it does still feel like a Silent Hill game, even though it's not actually set in Silent Hill. But that about sums it up. There's not massive differences between 3 and 4 compared to like 1 and 2 and 2 and 3. 3 is more different in terms of a story point, where 2 is more different from a gameplay and extra features point. But 4 is mostly like 3, mainly because they were kind of made alongside each other, so they do kind of feel quite similar. But obviously 4 has its kind of uniqueness with its first person perspective areas, and you know, just in general things that are in the game, like, you know, the AI following you around, being a bit more cautious on how they're doing throughout the entire game, stuff like that. But you know, overall 4 for me, and I really can't go into too much details with the story because a lot of this story in this game is massively spoilery, not only to Silent Hill 4 itself, but in a sense to the other games as well. So I don't really want to throw too much detail out there about it, but it is a good story. I do quite like the story. It's quite creepy, and coming to terms with kind of what you have to do at the end of the game is kind of weird, but it's still quite good, and the game is still genuinely quite spooky. There's a certain room I remember with a certain massive head that I walked into when I played it the first time through, and I've seen many people do it after that, and it's just so creepy to look at. But yeah, that'll do it with Silent Hill 4, and the first 4 Silent Hill games, really. Like, I just wanted to make videos talking about them if people hadn't played them before. Obviously, if you have interest in playing the Silent Hill series, they're not the most accessible things in the world right now. Again, your best bet is probably PS3, Xbox 360 kind of is more likely to get hold of them, as well as, you know, the advantage of having the series consoles and the Xbox One, because backwards compatible. Being backwards compatible makes it easier to find these things. But if you're PlayStation, like me, you know, it is a bit harder to find these games. Not so much 3 and 4, but 1 and 2 are not the most accessible things on current consoles, at least for PlayStation. But PC, Xbox probably have no issue finding them. If you haven't played them already, do definitely check them out. They are not things you want to miss, especially if you're a big fan of Resident Evil, which, you know, if you are watching this channel, I'm sure you are. But yeah, as I've mentioned before, obviously, I did want to just kind of cover the first 4 games in the series, because after that they do kind of deteriorate a little bit, and they're not as good as they are, you know, as they were, sorry, back then. But if anyone does have genuine interest in seeing, you know, Silent Hill Origins or Downpour or Homecoming or anything like that, do let me know, because I can always go back and look at those. I do remember playing some of those. I think I definitely played Homecoming. I remember playing Homecoming a little bit, as well as possibly Downpour. And Origins is something I didn't play at all. Honestly, didn't actually remember it existed for a while. But if anyone does have an interest in seeing those games, I'm more than happy to kind of go over them and take a look at them now. And you know, at the end of the day, I am one of those people that is holding out for another Silent Hill game. Do I think it's going to happen? Yeah, probably, eventually. Will there be an announcement this year? It's very possible, with the whole tease from Hideo and Guillermo del Toro from the Game Awards, with them saying they really hope one's being made, or they really hope there's another one coming, and obviously the whole running kind of rumours are that they are making one. So, you know, we'll have to wait and see. But that has been the Silent Hill videos I wanted to do, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4. If you haven't seen the others, I'll be sure to leave links in the description for those. You can check out whichever one you want, or watch all of them if it's up to you. But yeah, thank you for watching, thank you for the support on the Silent Hill videos, and I'll catch you all tomorrow for a brand new video.